So today we are discussing Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And uh, this time we wanted to choose a book in the science fiction category. And I think it was Tulika's idea to choose this one. And it was a really fascinating read, Tulika. Thank you so much for this book. So we are going to see a little bit about the history of this book and also a little bit about book burning through the years in history. And Ray Bradbury is such an interesting personality. And he's among the classic authors whom we've read. He's one of them who has lived in the recent years. So there's so much information about him, and he's a very interesting personality. So I have kept a little bit about to discuss about him. Then we're going to have some discussion topics like about political correctness and censorship, and whether books will they are they endangered, and will their relevance ever go. And after that, as always, we have some quotes from the book which we will discuss. So a little bit of the history. So why Fahrenheit 451? So, when the main reason why Ray Bradbury says that he wrote this book is because he felt freedom of speech is something so important. But at the same time, as and any author for that matter, as they write more, they come even much more under the public eye. And for example, Ray Bradbury used to get a lot of letters and emails asking him that he should change the way he treats female characters or black characters in his stories. And he feels that uh, he is depicting the reality. So he really didn't like this whitewashing of a particular, community, and always trying to take care so as not to offend a particular minority group. And this was one of the reasons why he wrote Fahrenheit. Apart from this, Ray Bradbury has been a person who he says that instead of being a college educated person, he was actually a library educated person. So books and libraries are something so close to his heart. So book burning around the world has been something that really disturbed him, and that was one of the reason why and I just thought, since we are talking about that, let's just talk a little bit more about book burning in particular in history. So one of the earliest book burning incidents happened during the China's Xin dynasty. And it is said that certain very important manuscripts relating to Chinese history were destroyed at this period, because of which there are huge gaps in Chinese history which they've never been able to fill it up. And still those periods are mysterious. People really don't know what exactly happened at those periods. So, and then of course the Library of Baghdad was another major library burning incident in history. The Nazi book burnings, I think most of us know about it. Another very recent incident of a major library being burned to the ground was the burning of the Jaffna Public Library in Sri Lanka, which took place in 1981. Since this is a more recent incident and something about which I have a little bit of knowledge, so I thought I'll just share a little more on this. Um, so before we go talking about the Jaffna Library, I would also like to say why he wrote this particular book. Another reason has been that this book was written in 1953, and in the 1950s, McCarthyism was uh, extremely spread in USA. So basically, McCarthyism means that the US government used to blacklist certain filmmakers or actors, screenwriters, authors, etc., whom they considered as communist. So, actually, this McCarthyism is so similar to the crazy witch hunts which took place during that period. And it's just that, if some one person is caught, he would just blindly say, yeah, it's that person also. Allow me to, go free. I'll show you another four people who are actually communist, and those four people may not be really communist. So there was this blind pointing of fingers to others, and there wasn't really any proper proof necessary at that period to catch someone and imprison them for life, except a suspicion that this person could be a communist. So there were a lot of faculty also who have from universities who underwent this. And so this was another important reason why uh, Ray Bradbury wrote this particular book at that particular point of time. Another big reason is that the rise of television ownership and the expansion of television broadcasting platforms really went through the roof during this period. And Ray Bradbury felt that this is only going to get worse. People are going to get more and more into the television, bigger screens. So in Fahrenheit 451, we see the wall-sized television screens, and which surround all the four walls in a room. So all this, was the reason, he felt this is what is going to happen in future. And I think he wasn't really wrong about that. Yeah. So another interesting thing over here in Fahrenheit 451 has been how there's this incident of when the books are being burnt in a particular house, the lady of the house burns herself with the books. So literally, she cannot tolerate that the books are big, her books, which she loves so much, are being burned. So in fact, she even burns herself. And surprisingly, in real life too, there have been so many people who have risked their lives to save books from tyrants, who are about to burn books. So one such incident has been about this librarian Abdul Qadir Hydra, and he had a few other people also help him. They smuggled out 350,000 manuscripts when Al Qaeda invaded Mali and Timbuktu in 2012, and they targeted priceless medieval manuscripts. So this is a picture of the librarian Abdul Qadir Hydra, and he's showing some of the manuscripts that he has retrieved and saved and smuggled out. So yes, so it's not just in the story that people are ready to die with their books. There are also people who have really risked their lives to save books. So now coming back to the Jaffna Library incident. So this was Jaffna Library before it was burnt in all its splendor. This was one of the most important libraries in this place called Jaffna, which was a Tamil dominated community in Sri Lanka. It was a cultural center also for the Tamil community. It housed nearly 100,000 Tamil books. And it also had some very rare and old manuscripts. I'm not sure how many of you know, they had these palm leaves, and earlier days they used to write on those palm leaves, and they were stored in those sandalwood boxes. So those kind of manuscripts were also there in Jaffna Library. And there was this war between the Tamil community and Sinhalese, which went on for decades. And the uh, the library was actually burnt by the police themselves, because they were angry with the community, some of the members in the community. There was some rioting, and it ended up that the police burnt down the entire library with the support of many members of the government. And the library continued to burn for actually 2 nights. They did not try to stop it. This was the image of the library after being burnt. And this was a really huge loss. And recently there was I think a few years ago, my husband had traveled to Jaffna, and the people there were still really upset about the loss of their library. So they pointed to the place and said, they did this. So this is how they've burnt the place down. Um, the reason why they felt so much was because there were certain irreplaceable manuscripts and stuff that they lost over there. For example, the only original copy of this Yalpana Vaibhava Male. This is basically the history of that city, Jaffna, and also the history of how the Tamil community settled down there. So the only copy of that manuscript is lost. There were miniature editions of Ramayana, which was also lost in the fire. There were these yellowing edition collections of extinct Tamil language newspapers. There was also a Christian missionary magazine, which is no longer being published. All those manuscripts were also lost to the fire, and they can never be replaced again. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly stop the share because I can't see chat messages if there are any, and I'll come back to this. So if anybody wants to share anything, maybe you can just let me know, or you can unmute yourself and add anything that you'd like to. Or should I proceed?
Better proceed, madam. This is
Okay.
only introduction. So we, okay. When book comes, we can participate.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll continue. Thank you. Okay. So the next discussion was about Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is called as a lyrical novelist, and one of the main reasons for this is because he is a huge lover of poetry, and he feels that poetry was a major influence in his writing, and he also feels that poetry has this power of using very few words to describe and also to express emotions. And he says that he tries to bring out the same thing in his writing of prose. Another interesting thing about Ray Bradbury is that he was interested not just in writing, but also in drawing and acting. And I think he has drawn the illustrations for a few books, and he's also acted in a couple of stage plays and on the radio too. So as a radio actor, there's this extremely interesting incident about him. So when he was 12 years old, he was interested in acting, and he wanted to. So those days on the radio, you would have a person read out the story and enact it on you can just hear them enacting it on the radio. So he wanted to do that. So he told his friends, "I'm going to go to the radio station and get a job as a radio actor." And he was just 12 years old. So his friends asked him, "Do you know anybody there?" So he said, "No, I don't know anyone there." "Then what are you going to do? Do you have any pull with someone over there?" He said, "No, I don't have anyone there, and I don't have any pull with anybody too." So they said, "Oh, okay, then I don't think it's going to work out." So he said, "Let me see. Let me just go and try my hand and see." So he goes there, and he reaches there. Obviously, nobody bothers about him, about a 12-year-old kid who's come there. So what he does is he empties out ashtrays for them. He buys newspapers for them, and he does all these little works. And he's just beneath them, and he keeps doing all these things around these big radio station stuff. And within 2 weeks, he lands a job as a radio actor for a comic series, and he reads out the comics every Saturday. So that was his first foray into acting. Another very interesting thing about him is that he only finished his schooling, and during the last couple of years of his schooling, he um, he starts going to the library. So every week, I think thrice a week, he used to go to the library in the evenings, and he just spends the entire time reading. And that's when he realizes that the library can actually give him a much better education than what even a college could give. And also, he couldn't afford college anyway. So he decided that I'm going to be library educated. So from that age, for the next 10 years, he continues doing that. where every week he visits the library thrice a week and he stays there all evening just reading books. And so he calls himself library educated and not college educated. Another interesting thing about him is that he's one of those few actors who never bothered about money. Uh, for a long time, his wife was the only breadwinner in the family. He wasn't really able to support her in any way. And even later, when he started making money, and in fact, he wrote the screenplay for Moby Dick, which was very famous, and he was very well known for that. After which he was offered War and Peace, and he was asked to write for War and Peace. And he was also offered $100,000 to write the screenplay for War and Peace, but he turned it down. So because he didn't like War and Peace, he said, I can never read it, so I'm not going to be able to do this job. And so that was very interesting, that despite not being very rich, he says that unless and until someone in my family is in the hospital and I'm badly in need of money, I'm never going to write anything which I don't want to write. So that's his justification. And another very interesting thing about him, probably more interesting for writers, is that he never had any notes or any outlines at all for his stories. This was because the second he got the idea for a story, he would write it. He would write the entire first draft of the story. So because he was so hardworking and he never waited to, develop the idea or anything. As soon as he got the idea, he sat, he wrote it down, and he wrote out the story. In fact, Fahrenheit 451 was written in 9 days. In just the 9 days, he completed the first draft of the story. So because of this, he never needed to actually do an outline or make any notes about the story or anything. If the story worked, it got published. If it didn't work, he just put it into a file and he would revisit it whenever he wanted. So this time I just thought it would be fun to, know a little bit about the author through the author's interviews, because there are a lot of interviews and a lot of quotes from Ray Bradbury. So instead of talking more about him, I'm just going to go through a few of his quotes where he speaks himself. So one of his most famous quotes, and also he says that he lives by this quote, it's this one. So jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Libraries raised me. I believe in libraries because most students don't have any money. When I graduated from high school, it was during the Depression and we had no money. I couldn't go to college, so I went to the library 3 days a week for 10 years. When I was a young writer, if you went to a party and told somebody you were a science fiction writer, you would be insulted. We were all closet science fiction writers. So this was because science fiction as a genre had no recognition at that point of time. So you could only get published in some magazines and things like that. So it was really difficult. So Ray Bradbury is one of those few writers who actually made people sit up and take notice of this genre. Another very interesting thing is that though Ray Bradbury's stories, most of them have very interesting messages in them, he says that you have to be very careful and you should not start lecturing people. So you've got to be careful. You don't start lecturing people. So you put your story a few years into the future and you invent a fireman who has been burning books instead of putting out fires. And you start him on the adventure of discovering that maybe books shouldn't be burned. He reads his first book, he falls in love, and then you send him out into the world to change his life. So this is how he describes Fahrenheit 451. This is my personal favorite quote of Ray Bradbury, and this is from the book Zen in the Art of Writing, a book by Ray Bradbury about writing. So run fast, stand still is basically the advice that he gives for writers. He says that when you write, you must run fast, so fast, and that you are actually writing down the entire idea at that point of time. So that time you're not sitting and looking at grammar and doing other things. You just run fast. Stand still means that you're supposed to stand still and keep looking, make stillness a part of your life so that you can allow ideas to flow in. So it basically is our current day thing of, maybe avoiding technology, being still, meditating, or all those other things to allow ideas to come to us. In fact, for this particular quote, the example that he gives is that of a lizard. So he says that if you see a lizard, it keeps standing still for a very long time and then it starts just running into a corner. So that's how you're supposed to be as a writer: run fast, stand still. Um, so with this, we finish the section on him. Uh, so I'm going to start with the discussion topics. What I'll do is I'll finish the first discussion topic and then maybe I'll come back to the chat and have a look at, if you want to share anything. The first discussion topic is on political correctness. So is it right? Um, how much are we supposed to censor ourselves in the name of political correctness? Another, I think I should say, another important thing that I need to convey here is that even I'm not sure of the answers for most of these questions. So we are just having a discussion. I don't have any clear ideas to tell you that this is the way it should be done. So let's see about that. So Ray Bradbury was extremely critical of political correctness. So he says political correctness is the real enemy these days. The black groups want to control our thinking, and you can't say certain things. The homosexual groups don't want you to criticize them. It's thought control and freedom of speech control. Um, so this is, maybe it's what he's saying is right to a certain extent, but then again, uh, allowing a person to tell anything may not always work. Like, for instance, there are certain countries which are, I don't want to name any, but you may be knowing, multi-cultural, multi-religious countries where there are very strict rules against speaking about a particular culture. So people of a particular culture cannot speak anything against or anything that can even hurt the person of that other culture. So you need to be extremely careful on what you talk about the person of the other culture. This may be right too, because if anyone can speak anyone, it's going to lead to a riot. So when you know that you can be penalized for your words, that you cannot speak in derogatory terms about another, then maybe it is right to a certain extent. Maybe political correctness is right. So I again, there are differing views on this. So if you please, I would love to know what are your views too. You can put it on chat, or you can unmute yourself and let me know. So I just want to, political correctness. And so one of the question is where to draw the line, who will be drawing the line, and is it right for books to be banned just because they are not politically correct? And I want to talk about this incident of the author, famous Tamil author Perumal Murugan. Many of you might have read his books because they are extremely popular nowadays after his book banning incident, and most of them are translated in English too. So Perumal Murugan writes beautifully, and I did read his book One Part Woman, and the entire book flows very beautifully. It goes well. The whole story ends, and after the ending of the story, there is a little small author's note behind which says that the story is true. The problem is the story is about a childless couple where the wife uses uh, tries to conceive a child in a society approved adulterous manner. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but it's something which is approved by the society. They allow it just so that she can conceive a child, but at the same time, it's done in a very hush way behind religious screens and other things. I don't want to give out a lot because I would love you to pick up the book and actually read it. It's really worth a read because the language is so beautiful. Even the translation is beautiful. When I read the book, I was actually angry, a little bit angry on Perumal Murugan, because I felt this is not fair. Why does he need to mention that? His book is so beautiful. It doesn't really need that author note saying that this is true. Why does he need to do that? Why does he need to spoil the image of that entire, village? And is it fair? Why did he do that? And of course, there was a huge backlash, and the book was banned, at least in Tamil. I think it got translated in English, and the English version wasn't banned. So at that point of time, I did feel, that maybe it was justified, maybe he shouldn't have done it. But very quickly I changed my point of view, because if it's okay to ban his book because a particular group felt hurt by it, then it never ends. It's just not going to end. Like what they say, what is shown in Fahrenheit 451. Of course, Uncle Tom's Cabin would be very hurtful for the whites, because it shows them in such a bad light, that they treated blacks in such a bad light. So they would be hurt by it. So ban Uncle Tom's Cabin. Every single book written would hurt someone or the other. A book might hurt them. Some book might hurt men. Some book might hurt women. Some book might hurt, as Ray Bradbury says, some book might hurt a cat lover. Some book might hurt a dog lover. So where's the end to this? And if you go on banning books, it's just not justified. It's not justified at all. So how can I say that it's okay to ban, maybe Perumal Murugan's book, it's okay to ban, but you cannot ban Uncle Tom's Cabin? That's not fair then. Because if you're okay with this, then you're okay with that. And who makes who makes this rule? How is it right? Who decides which books can be banned, which books cannot be banned? There itself the problem arises. And where do you draw the line, that this is only what has hurt is hurtful, this particular thing is not hurtful? Again, where do you draw the line to this? So I felt it's very interesting, and I thought the I really felt bad that at some point of time I thought it was justified to ban his book, because I'm really wrong. I strongly feel now that there should never be a ban on any book because it offends anyone on earth. If someone feels offended by a book, then please don't read it or write another book justifying your side. I think that's the only solution that I can think of. So before we go to the next points, let me just stop screen share and okay, just read the comments. So Sarit says another example is burning down of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad by Mongols in about the 12th century. Yes, this house contained translations of all books of the world that the Persians could lay their hands on. Its burning down was a irreparable loss. Very true. In fact, one very interesting thing was that even when I was working on my second book, that is Tales from the History of Mathematics, I came across this very interesting story where people from India, they actually traveled, towards travel to Baghdad and other places, to the Arab areas, and over there. Um, and over there they share Brahmagupta's work. So Brahmagupta's work wasn't written, so they share it vocally. And when they share it vocally, their that work gets translated, and that's how Brahmagupta's work actually passes to the world, and that's how the decimal system itself passed through the world, and that's how it became a unified mathematical system everywhere. So I think burning down of the House of Wisdom is probably one of the greatest losses for knowledge in the world, because it had the translations of all the books of the world, as Sarat says here. So Ranjini asks, when did Ray Bradbury write the quote about political correctness? So Ray Bradbury wrote this quote, Ranjini, after he wrote this after writing Fahrenheit 451. So this this term called political correctness was actually getting popularity at that particular point of time. So he wanted to say that, so many people asked him, even before the terminology political correctness became popular, your book actually talks about it. So he says, yes, uh, science fiction, that's how science fiction is usually what he says, because he says that it's a fiction which sees the future and it can predict what would happen in the future. So the book burning, Tulika says, the book burning reminded me of the book Thief, where she rescues a book from the Nazi bonfire. Yes, the incident is a on screen, especially in the movie, it's really something to see that. So the Nazis targeted a lot of intellectuals, yeah, like in Fahrenheit 451. True, true, very, very true. So in fact, this there's something interesting about this word intellectual also, which comes up in Fahrenheit 451, where the word itself is considered as derogatory. Uh, just give me 1 second. Somebody seems to be in the waiting room. Okay, it's fine. So okay, let's continue. I'll continue back with the discussion. If there's anything, please do add in the chat. Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was about pluralism and whether differences can coexist in society. So this has been something very I read a lot about pluralism recently, and I watched a few videos too. I'll also share the links to that in the chat box. Do check it out. So pluralism is the concept that different views, different cultures can not only coexist, but he says they should coexist in a society. That only when the different cultures coexist can you have actually a society of liberalism. You can't call yourself liberal if you're having only people around you who are liberal. So if it's to be called as a real liberal society, then there needs to be differences which coexist. And so absolutism and versus pluralism. And so why do we need both? I mean, I meant here not why do we need absolutism and pluralism. I meant why do we need both? I'm now understanding it sounds bad. So why do we need differences of opinion is what I wanted to say. So pluralism is a necessity. So I just read many articles which say that it is a part of society. All societies are plural, but right now it's become so. Okay, so 1 second. Oh, sorry. Somebody is waiting. I'll just admit 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So pluralism is a necessity. It has to be, it's a condition of society, is what they say. Um, Now, right now, the trend towards, intolerance is more. So you feel your opinion is the right one. So you do not want to accept the opinion of another. And it's not just acceptance, it's like you want to completely cancel that particular opinion. you know so the cancel culture is a threat to liberal society, and it's, of course, as we all know, social media is one of the main reasons why this cancel culture has become as rampant as what it is right now. So it's when it comes to pluralism, what he's trying to say is that you must not just think that I need to reconcile differences, because that's not going to happen. So we shouldn't try to actually reconcile differences, but sorry, yeah, not just reconcile differences, but we have to try to accommodate differences, because it's not possible to reconcile differences. At some point of time, certain things you can just not give up your opinion, neither can you accept the other person's opinion. So you can we need to be able to accommodate the difference. You can tell them it's okay to have your opinion, and I'm going to stick with my own opinion. But what is the limit to this toleration? To what extent can we take it? Again, there was a very interesting video on this. I'll share the links to that too in the chat. So in that video, he says that when you cannot understand the limit for toleration, you usually try and appeal to justice. However, justice itself, he says, is not clearly defined, because again, there it depends on the person who is the judge. So it depends, you start seeing from his eye, and you cannot always say that his eye is going to be right. Depending on the person who's the judge, justice is going to change. And justice itself, even as law, even in legal terms, it's not always that in, black and white. There are various shades of gray. So few things which we can understand is that we should never, of course, exercise violence to force a point of view on another person. But just not forcing, exercising violence does not alone mean pluralism. Pluralism also means that we try to understand the other person's point of view. um, so so this, I think, is very relevant when it comes to Fahrenheit 451, the concept of pluralism. So one more topic for discussion is about the future of books and whether is it endangered. Just 1 minute. Yeah. So the future of books and is it endangered? Okay. So if we coming back to the story, we can see that there aren't a lot of people fighting for the books. There's only some people who are actually, fighting for the books and to save the books. So why is this? What is the reason behind this? So there are a few reasons mentioned by the author. The first one is, of course, the popularity of other competing forms of entertainment. So there's faster cars and bigger television, constant, uh, constant entertainment, loud music. And because of all this, that's more enticing. So, for the sake of instant gratification, people have lost um, the slowness of books, the relishing of books. Next comes another important reason why the love for books seems to be lost in Fahrenheit 451, and that is how the narrative has been changed around the books. How censorship and political correctness seems to be a norm. So if you see in the book, there's no clear single reason given for the for why books just disappeared. There are a multitude of reasons actually given, and it wasn't a single day thing. Also, it is something which happened gradually over the years. Another reason is that it is also shown that books threaten equality, because a person who reads the book will be, of course, much more intelligent and much more knowledgeable than a person who doesn't read the book. Yeah, so books are endangered nowadays as people are busy. True, very true. So one more point is here. This is where I was just telling, adding to Tulika's point. Intellectual itself, the word becomes a swear word in, yeah, in Fahrenheit 451. So that's a very interesting thing, that just being seen as someone who reads books and who is an intellectual itself is considered like a swear word, because then you're not equal to them. So rather than allowing your neighbor to read a book and prove that they are somewhere somewhat superior to you, you just call the police and make sure that all the books over there are burnt. So this is what has been happening. Okay. Fine. I'm going to stop share and just check out for some messages in the chat. Just one second. Sorry for that. Yeah. So Ranjini says, if you have been to Berlin, you would have seen the place where the books were burnt. And they have created a space underground that is the size of the room where the burnt books were stored. Okay. That's quite scary and disturbing. Um, Ranjini, will you like to unmute yourself and share a bit more about your experience?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. I'm just lurking here because I haven't read Fahrenheit 451, though I have a lot of opinions on all the topics that Archana has so nicely lined up. About the Berlin story, I think a few months before we all got locked into our own places thanks to COVID. I have made a visit to Berlin, and it was a business trip, and I was alone. So I was like a lone tourist and doing what I could, and then I didn't know this, but there was this place called Bebelplatz where, it's a monument. Berlin is a beautiful city. And then the guide, it was a walking tour of Berlin. And then they take us to this place where they say, look down. So you look, it's like an open plaza. And then you look down and there's a glass square through which you can look inside, and you look inside and you see there's nothing. Basically, it's shelves and shelves with nothing in it. So they said so 20,000 books were burned down in 1933. And so as a memorial to those books that were burned down, they built a space equal to, where these books would have otherwise been held. No words, no explanation. It's just, and it's out there. You don't have to enter a museum. You stand there in the open air and look under your feet. And that itself is quite a harsh reminder and a message, especially to book lovers, saying, how could someone do this? So, these are not fictional things, right? These are real things.
Exactly.
And we all have our opinion about it. So.
That's just before the meeting could start. Actually, Shamil Rao was one of the first persons here, and we were talking about the same thing. How history seems to just repeat itself right from BC. The book burning has been happening right from that time, and it just seems to be just repeating itself again and again. And I don't know.
But I think there is more loss now because you may have books, but if you don't have readers, it's the same thing as, you have something that you don't appreciate. And
Yeah.
I also had one more thought that when you were saying about banning books, I was thinking, what's the difference between banning books and burning books?
Yeah.
Basically, you don't allow them to exist, right? Or
Exactly.
be accessible.
Right.
So these are all ways of curbing speech and thought, and allowing people to have original thoughts and share them with others. So
yeah,
I don't see any difference between banning and burning.
Exactly. In fact, I saw this very interesting meme, which says that, which just compares book burning during the Hitler period to the Facebook's recent, way of controlling speech, So your post has been removed because it's against our community guidelines. So they say this is the normal book, the, modern day book burning.
Yeah, agree.
I'm sorry, I can just see ODH9XE. I'm sorry, I don't know who it is. If you want, you can unmute yourself and please introduce yourself. So people are so busy that they don't have time to sit down with a good book and appreciate it. We have no time to stand and stare. Oh, so true, very true. And in fact, especially I live here in Singapore, where I think there are a lot of readers, because considering the amount of crowd which I see in the libraries, of course, there's a lot of readers. But at least 99% of the people whom I see in public transportation are just fixed to their phones. I never see them, look up, see anyone, or just sit simply, or even read a book. I've never seen that. So that's true. They, people are very busy, and whatever little time they get, they rather spend it with their gadget than with anything else, I guess. Tulika says in Fahrenheit 451, not just books, but any activity that would allow people to pause and think are discouraged. So talking, chatting, discussing, or even walking. Yeah. In fact, So there's this, I'm not sure if your books also had this incident. So though a lot of things actually encouraged Ray Bradbury to write this, but the most important incident which triggered him to immediately write the book was when he was walking down the road with his friend one night, and suddenly he's stopped by the police officer, and he asked them, what are you all doing, why are you walking here, what's your work, what you all are doing, and all these things. And then when he finally leaves, lets them go, he says, don't walk again, or something like that, something that means the same. So he's like, Ray Bradbury is actually taken aback. Even walking is banned, is it? And that's what prompts him to write the book. Uh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tulika's read that incident. Yes, Tulika. So I think it was in the foreword of the book. When you ban a book, everyone wants to read it. Perumal Murugan books sell like hotcakes. Oh, yes. Tell me about it. They do. But I'd also like to think that maybe, yeah, that is definitely true. When we ban a book, people actually want to read him. And in fact, when the Perumal Murugan's book was banned, he said that he's never going to write again. But then when he saw that his books are actually selling like hotcakes and that people are so appreciative of his writing skills, I think that's what prompted him to come back to writing, which is a very good thing, because after that also his books are so beautifully written. And even when translated, of course, there is a little bit of loss. I think the Tamil books are definitely written much better. His language, there is a little loss, but still I would encourage you to read even the English versions. They are really good. So does anyone else want to share anything? Actually, Sarat, do you want to share about your trip to Jaffna, or do you want to share about your the House of Wisdom? Because I think that was that's something very, very close to your heart.
Yeah, thanks, Archana. Yes, I was seeing a serial in greatcoursesplus.com, where they were talking about the middle, the golden ages, the Islamic golden age. And at that time, the ruler of Baghdad had undertaken a very ambitious program. Successive rulers of Baghdad had undertaken a very ambitious program of translating every book that they could get hold of from wherever in the world, in whichever language, and translating it into Persian and keeping it in that House of Wisdom. So it was a huge repository of many different books. Unfortunately, the whole thing was burnt down by Mongols in the siege of Baghdad. So it was so many books that it is said that the river Tigris was running black because of the ink from the books. It was very unfortunate.
That's such a vivid picture. Okay, so I'll just proceed with the discussion. There's a little bit more left, and then I'll come back. Okay. Yeah, so when I was talking about this, the future of books, of course, one big reason why more people weren't fighting for the books was the last point here, which I forgot to mention, which was fear. Of course, I think not everyone would want to risk their lives just to save books. So we were having a discussion at home too about, was it really right for that for that woman to actually burn herself with books? Maybe it makes more sense for the for those people who are living in the forest, each of whom had actually completely by hearted one book so that they could at least live and reproduce the book later on. That makes more sense, at least something to carry forward, rather than really dying for a book. So I don't know, it's again, it's something very I think very personal and also very difficult. Yeah, so one more thing about this was about which is shown in Fahrenheit 451 are the loud and distractive other forms of entertainment like fast cars, loud music, advertisements, television and radio. And this is even before internet. So the book has actually just become even much more relevant now. This constant stimulation, there's absolutely no concentration, numbed feelings, and all this is one of the main reasons why the books aren't any more popular. So one more thing which prompted Ray Bradbury to write Fahrenheit 451 was the popularity of condensed books in the 1950s in USA. So people started having this feeling that we don't have time to read an entire book, and condensed books became the big rage at that time in US. And this was something that really hurt Ray Bradbury, and he was so much against it. So so all this, I think, were also factors why he wrote the book. Okay, so now coming to some quotes. You're not like the others. I've seen a few, I know. When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon last night. The others would never do that. Uh, so as Tulika had pointed out, so there was no conversation. So there was no talking between people or sharing views between people. So which is why Clarice is so surprised when Guy Montag actually looks at her and talks to her. And even when she talks about the moon, he looks at the moon. People won't even take the effort or have the inclination to look at the moon, is what she tries to say. I'm going to share some few more quotes. In case there's some quotes which you like and you would like to share, please do drop them in the chat. This was something which also was very interesting. So speed up the film, Montag, quick. Bang, smack, wallop, bing, bong, boom. Digest. Politics, one column, two sentences, a headline. So that's how it starts getting, Captain BT shows the condensation of news and how everything needs to be quick. So whirl man's mind around about so fast under the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, broadcasters, that the centrifuge flings off all unnecessary time wasting thought. So there's no time to think. Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, Chinese, Italians, Germans, and the whole thing. So the people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, mechanics anywhere. The bigger your market, Montag, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. Authors full of evil thoughts. Lock up your typewriters. They did. So when I read this, so this is actually, that the what do they say, disclaimer that they put up in before any, it reminded me of which they put up in before any movie or something. The people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, or mechanics anywhere. So I think most of us are familiar with the recent issues with Tandav, and that it projected some religious deities in a wrong way, and that there was a lot of hue and cry about it, and they wanted to ban it. They wanted to arrest the persons responsible behind making it. So as soon as this happened, I don't know how many of you noticed that all the serials in Netflix and I think even in Prime, for that matter, have now started having these huge disclaimers in the beginning. So this is not meant to represent anyone. This is not meant to hurt any religious or culture or language or whatever. All that huge disclaimers now pop up before any web series. And also the disclaimer lasts on the screen for at least a minute or two, so that we fully have the time and patience to read the entire thing. It was surprising. So I think this is the start of how it begins. So we stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theory and thought. We have our fingers in the dike. Hold steady. Don't let the torrent of melancholy and the drear philosophy drown our world. Captain Beatty was actually one of the for me personally, I found him as one of the most interesting characters created by Ray Bradbury in this book, because here was a person uh, who was who was burning books, but at the same time he had read enough books to know the value of books and the importance of books. He could literally quote books, but at the same time he also was trying to justify the book burning. I think that's why somewhere, towards the end, after Guy Montag murders him, he says that I think Captain Beatty was wanting to be killed. He wanted to die, because he wasn't happy in the life that he was actually living. Again, this is only Guy's words. We don't know the truth because Captain Beatty seems very sure of himself. But yeah. So we have everything we need to be happy, but we aren't happy. Something's missing. I looked around. The only thing I positively knew was gone was the books I've burnt in 10 or 12 years. So I thought books might help. So this is what Guy says, that, when he wants to find out how to get happiness, so how to find happiness. So he says that maybe I've burnt it with the books. So that's when I go for the books, maybe I'll get back my happiness too. So these are just a few references of, the stuff that I went through before I also want to share some links. So I'm going to stop this share and I'll put in a few links on the chat. Okay, so there are a lot of messages which have come up. Let me just go through them. Okay. When I read about the burning of the lady along with the books, I could not digest. It was I was not able to sleep the night. Yeah, it is particularly disturbing. Also, I think it's so personal. Maybe for someone like, even for instance, I feel Ray Bradbury might have felt that, because he had his entire education, his entire career, everything through the library that he used to always visit, and he grew up reading those books. So maybe he could see himself in her position. Shamil Rao says a banned book has the potential of appearing again in the open once the political or sociological equations change. But a book that is burnt is lost forever. True, but maybe Shamil Raoji, it may be, I think, more easier now with the with online mediums and everything else. It may be now easier to have access to a book which is banned. Despite being banned, we can still access it. However, I don't think this was the case before. So maybe books which were banned before, I don't know whether they do come. And currently, I think the situation has also changed. Another thing is the noise is so much. Every day there are, I don't know, maybe dozens of books published. So again, we can't say that, a political or sociological change would once again bring back those books which were, which were banned at that point of time. I'm not sure whether that would really happen. Cannot imagine literature without poetry. Cell phone is the main culprit. Everyone wants to be on social media. True, very, very true. Shamil Raoji, would you like to add something to your point? Yeah, Tulika, a lot of banned books have come back in circulation. Tulika, are you talking about the old time books like, I think many are there. I'm trying to remember some. But books like, in fact, I would like to read the book by, oh God, I'm not able to remember the name. I'm sorry. Yeah, but
Archana, lots of books like To Kill a Mockingbird. There are lots of books which were once banned, which are now okay. People, they are not banned any longer. So that way, what Mr. Samal Rao says is right. If you burn a book, it's not
correct.
forever. Lots of books, lots.
Oh,
Anything.
Ranjani got it. I'm sorry. It sometimes suddenly just slips my mind. Yeah, Satanic verses. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So that
yeah,
was one of the
Salman
things which I
Rushdie.
really want to read. I don't understand what's the big hue and cry about it. So that's been something
Yeah.
that I've been wanting to read. Yeah, but okay. But Tulika wasn't like a very long time passed before that those
Yeah,
books
that's
actually
right.
came back.
That's right. A lot of time needs to pass. That's
Yeah.
true.
Just 1 second. Okay, so one more book, which which I wanted to show was this one by Wendy Doniger. It's called The Hindus. So this was banned and then it was pulped by Penguin, after which it was published by Speaking Tiger.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is one. So I think, yeah, it does happen. So like what Mr. Shamal Rao said, Shamal Rao has shared a quote here. Luckily, queer ones like her, Clarice, don't happen often. We know how to nip most of them in the bud early. You can't build a house without nails and wood. If you don't want a house built, hide the nails and wood. Yeah. Actually, one more thing about Clarice is that there was a lot of opposition. Uh, Clarice is shown basically they're not very clear on what happens to her in the book, but it is assumed that she's dead. She's killed. So this was something very disturbing to most of the readers because she's one of those I think one of the most memorable characters in the book and one of those sweet little girls and so when the movie was taken, Ray Bradbury actually keeps her alive. And in fact, when Guy Montag escapes into the forest area and all, he meets her again. So that was supposed to be something which most people who watched the movie really liked about uh, when compared to the book. Okay, D.H. Lawrence's book Lady Chatterley's. Yeah, right. That was another banned book. Correct. So yes, I think true. It is true, but I'm not sure if a book will. Do you think a book which is banned in today's world, uh, do you think will it come back maybe after 100 years or something? Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe Satanic Verses would be popular and very easily available then in all bookstores. I don't know. Maybe let's see. So, would anybody else like to add anything? Please feel free to unmute yourself. Meanwhile, I'll just introduce the next book which we are reading is The Plague by Albert Camus. And I'll also share the links which I wanted to share with you. Just a minute. These were some very interesting articles on pluralism, and it's also one is a video too. I'll put it in the links here. Yes. The last link is a biography of Ray Bradbury, which is also very interesting. In fact, if you can get access to the Paris Review interview of Ray Bradbury, you must read it. It's very interesting, especially as a writer. It's very interesting to see how how did he actually make himself to being just a school student who's just passed out of school to a writer, and how he started writing. He started writing from the age of 11, I think. So there are a lot of stories in his interview there. So that's a very interesting read too. So if there is nothing else, then I'll close the discussion for today. Thank you so much for joining in. Really enjoyed reading this book with all of you and looking forward to our next discussion. Bye. Bye bye, Shamal Raoji. Bye. Bye, Ranjani.
Bye. Good night.
Bye. Good night.